What's up, guys? I'm BTC. We just got a whole bunch of new info on Overwatch 2, including Sombra and Bastion Reworks. We'll get to that in just a second. Something else that was mentioned that is worth noting is that currently Blizzard is testing Doomfist as a tank. Now, Jeff Goodman did say that they're not sure if this is where he's going to stay or if they're going to end up moving him back. But usually when they drop hints like that, they are inclined to go with it. Because if they're just testing something, then usually they're not going to tell anybody because they don't want people to get all excited or any of that sort of thing. So when they drop hints, it means that they're more leaning towards actually doing it, which means I think it's very likely we're going to see Doomfist moved into the tank role. Let's take a look at Sombra's rework. They made a whole bunch of changes to this character, although she still kind of feels the same way that she did before. All of the abilities are still there, it's just that they have a bit of a different functionality to them. And really, it's not any surprise because they do need to get rid of a lot of the CC stuff because they want to only have tank characters with a lot of the CCs, which is kind of why you have Doomfist moving into the tank role, so he can keep those different crowd control aspects of his abilities. And when he's in the tank role, it's not going to matter. But with Sombra, you can't have her locking out enemies for prolonged periods of time. So what's going to end up happening is the hack now has been changed. It will last for 8 seconds, and it has a cooldown of only 3 or 4 seconds, but it only actually locks out the enemy abilities for the first 1 second. So the whole thing will last for 8 seconds, but only the first second will lock out any abilities. However, the remaining time, it will grant vision to both Sombra and her team. So kind of like the sonic arrow that Hanzo has, it will now grant vision on that one target. But there's also an extra benefit to it for Sombra specifically, because part of her passive had now been changed to where she will deal 50% extra damage to any target that's been hacked. And it still has some of the extra lingering effects. You can use it to cancel enemy abilities that are being channeled, the big ultimates and that sort of thing. You can also use it to just kind of momentarily cause an enemy tank to drop the shield, all those sorts of things. So it still has some of that lockout functionality, but it's not as ridiculous as it is currently in the regular or in Overwatch 1. Hack also has very nice synergy with the new invisibility. For the most part, it functions the same. However, now you can use Hack while invisible. Now, there is a little bit of a catch to this because you do briefly become visible while you're using the Hack ability, but it doesn't end the invisibility itself. So as soon as it gets canceled or as soon as the hack is correctly applied to an enemy, you immediately go back to being fully invisible. So it's awesome to be able to do that, to just kind of pop out, use the hack, and then immediately retreat if you need to. Or, you know, the enemy can also kind of react when they see you briefly become visible. So there is a little bit of counterplay to it. The teleport ability is the exact same as it was in Overwatch 1. However, Sombra's ultimate EMP is now significantly different and quite a bit stronger. Instead of just being an AoE version of the hack, it will still do some of that, where it will still apply the hack effect to all the enemies in the area, and they get locked out for that 1 second, and it also grants the vision and the extra passive damage for Sombra, just like the normal hack would. But the extra bonus of the EMP is that it will now deal damage equal to 40% of the enemy's total health. So just like with Sigma's ultimate, where it does 50% of the enemy's health, the EMP will now deal 40% damage to all of the enemies in the area, in addition to the regular hack effects that they would normally get, right? The 1 second lockout, the extra passive damage for Sombra, and all that sort of stuff. So now using EMP will take away a massive amount of health from pretty much everyone in the area, but it doesn't have the complete lockout effect. So it's much more in line with a damaging kind of DPS ultimate as it was, instead of being the support type utility ultimate that it's always been. Overall, I think this version of Sombra is much, much better, and she's going to be a lot more useful in almost all situations. She won't be just a niche character that you use to build up EMP and then just start up a team fight with her. Like, you'll be able to use her more frequently in just regular fights, and she's not going to be limited to what types of maps and just other kinds of niche aspects of the characters. She will be like a regular, proper DPS character, and it looks like she has a lot of potential. Obviously, she isn't going to be used in every single situation, but it definitely looks like this Sombra is going to be way better than the current Overwatch 1 version. Moving on to Bastion, he got significantly more changes than Sombra did. First of all, he's getting a much bigger visual update than a lot of the other characters. Every character moving into Overwatch 2 is getting a visual update, but Bastion got a little extra attention. Instead of being the kind of box-type character that he was before, now he is going to be a much more modern, sleeker-looking kind of Omnic model, and this is all supposed to be done by Torbjorn, and it's also why a lot of his abilities and stuff have gotten changed as well. So, moving on to his abilities, the first thing is that the self-heal is just completely gone. They've removed it, and instead it's been replaced with something called the Tactical Grenade, which is basically a ball of energy that will bounce off the walls, and it will also stick to things, and it can stick to players, and then it does AoE damage. So it's a pretty nice ability for Bastion to use. Also, his primary attack has been changed. So now it's a lot slower than it was before, but it's also far more accurate. There is no spread on it at all. So now you can hit targets really far away a lot more accurately. They described it as being kind of almost a pseudo sniper type weapon, just like they wanted originally, but didn't kind of end up happening. So now you have that. But keep in mind, it is hit scan, which means that it does have a lot of fall-off damage. So even though you can hit targets that are going to be really far away, you're not going to be doing a tremendous amount of damage when you actually use it. But moving on to the tank and sentry forms, what they've done is combined both of those into one ability. So now you can switch into that one ability. It will have the sentry gun, but at the same time, you have the tank treads to move around. So this is an incredibly powerful... I think you might actually even move faster than normal because of the tank treads, but this is an incredibly powerful ability that Bastion can shift into. However, you can't just turn into it and stay there like you could with the normal sentry form. Instead, it's on a cooldown, and there's also a timer for how long you can use it. I don't believe they gave the exact specifications on how long it's going to last. I think they're still kind of messing with that and how long the cooldown is. But basically, it's just a normal ability. It's kind of like Hanzo's Storm Arrows, where you activate it and you use it until it's done, and then you go back to your normal attacks. The funny thing is, a lot of this, and a lot of what Jeff Goodman said during this little broadcast, was the same stuff that I've been saying forever, where the problem with Sentry Form is that it's so much better than the normal recon mode, and because you can just switch into it and stay in it forever, there's really no reason to ever go back. So the solution to that is to either put it on a timer or to give it a fuel gauge, and what they did is exactly that. They put it on a timer, and they also have the cooldown as well for when you activate the ability. And now Bastion has a brand new ultimate called Artillery, and this is actually similar to one of the things that they tried out way back when Overwatch was still in alpha. They ended up getting rid of it and giving him the tank form. But what happens now in this version is you go into the Artillery form, and then you have kind of a top-down view, just like what Doomfist has when he uses his ultimate. Except with Bastion, you get to choose 3 different locations, and then he will launch an attack up into the air. It's a projectile, and then it will come down and it will deal a huge amount of damage. It does 300 damage for the area and another 300 damage for a direct. So if you manage to hit someone directly with one of these, then you do 600 damage. But Jeff Goodman said that it is incredibly difficult to actually hit someone directly with one of these. So for the most part, it's going to do 300 damage in an area, but you do have a little bit of a timer on it. So just like with Torbjorn's Molten Core, where you activate it, you don't have to use all of them right away. You can use one, and then wait a couple seconds and use another, and wait a couple seconds and use another. Something else about these attacks, Jeff Goodman says that they're projectiles, which means that D.Va can use Defense Matrix to destroy them. They can be blocked by shields, and even Genji can deflect them. Now, I don't know exactly how that's going to work, whether it's just going to go straight back up and then come back down, or if it's going to go up and then it's going to land on Bastion and go back to the original location or whatever. But that's pretty cool that Genji can look straight up and use deflect in order to get rid of this new artillery attack. So that's a really cool thing that could happen. But that is Bastion's new ultimate, Artillery. So when are we going to actually get to see these changes in-game? For Bastion, I don't think any of this is going to happen until Overwatch 2. For Sombra, I think that there's a very small possibility they could actually implement these changes in Overwatch 1. It's unlikely, but I think they could, because right now, Sombra is a very situational, very niche character. She has an incredibly low pick rate. So if they did make these changes, I think it is a possibility that, yeah, it could work in Overwatch 1. They might have to do a little bit of extra balancing in order to kind of make it so that it's not too strong or too weak because of the whole 6v6 versus the 5v5 thing. But I think potentially they could take the Sombra changes and put them into Overwatch 1. However, even if Blizzard doesn't decide to add the Sombra changes to Overwatch 1, we could still possibly get it through the workshop. I've made a whole bunch of hero concepts, and I have fully working workshop codes for those characters, and they're using the Overwatch 2 5v5 template with all of the changes. I've talked to Magic Man, the guy who helped me with these different workshop codes, and it does seem very possible that we can get the Sombra changes to work and add them to the workshop and actually get to experience what it would look like with all of these Sombra changes. As far as the Bastion changes, probably not, because there are some pretty big problems with Bastion in Sentry mode, and it just doesn't really it doesn't really work when you want to move the character around. But the Sombra changes could definitely be a possibility that we see in the workshop. So there you go, guys. The changes for Sombra and Bastion, the reworks. Also, Doomfist looks like he's getting moved into the tank role. What do you guys think about all this? Let me know down below. A big thanks to all the Paragons and other channel members for all your support. If you'd like to become one and grab some cool rewards, click the join button down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.